Hi, Pastor Charlie here with another edition of Pastor Charlie's Toolbox. And you might notice I'm back in the garage. So today I'm trying to tune up this old outboard motor and well, to be honest with you, I don't know a lot about outboard motors. So I have to read up, and I noticed here, warning. Motor cover removal exposes you to moving parts. Keep hands, hair, and clothing away from flywheel starter and air intake. What's a flywheel starter? You know, the thing is, I like motors. I know a little bit about motors, but motors are not my specialty. They're very complicated. I mean, there's wires and there's hoses and there's thingamajiggers. And yeah, I can tell you this is a carburetor here, but other than that, I don't know an extreme amount because they're just complicated for me. Complicated. Well, you know what? A lot of things in life are complicated. And it takes someone very unique to take something complicated and explain it in easy to understand ways. You know, one of the reasons I know anything about motors is because people took the time to explain things to me about what they are and how they work and give me a little bit of background at least. Now, one of the reasons Jesus was very popular with people was because he didn't make things overly complicated. So, I mean, take our lesson today from Matthew 13. Here, Jesus gives us examples of what the kingdom of heaven is like. So, he's taking something very complicated, the kingdom of heaven, but he's making it easy to understand. And he does that by taking just ordinary, everyday items and using them to show us something. So he starts out by saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a small seed. Well, if you know anything about seeds, and this is a package of seeds, well, it was, they're very small. I wanted to take one out and show you, but it got lost in my fingers, so you couldn't even see it. It's that small. Now, Jesus didn't talk about cucumber seeds, but think about it. These seeds are so small, but they grow into a cucumber plant and a cucumbers. So a cucumber plant can stretch way out, and even the cucumbers, you know how big they get. In the same way, Jesus talks about yeast. If you don't understand gardening, he moves on to baking. So yeast, and a can like this would have a lot in it. They're just tiny little things, and you only need a little bit for baking. But yeast takes your baking, and when it cooks, it becomes huge, like a whole loaf of bread. So what Jesus is pointing out to us here is the kingdom of God should not be underestimated. Don't underestimate it, because the smallest things, the smallest actions we do, the smallest words of comfort we give, the smallest words of hope we give can grow to something really, really big. Don't underestimate the kingdom of God. Another way Jesus compares the kingdom of God is to say it's like a treasure that's hidden in a field. But it's a field you don't own. So if you knew about this treasure hidden in a field that belongs to the owner of the field, would you not just sell everything you had so that you could afford to buy that field? Because when you do, that treasure is yours. And he uses also the example of a pearl of great value. If a trader in precious stones finds one, would they not sell everything they have in order to buy it and make the big profit on it? In some ways, we have that right here in the north, where a long time ago geologists found stones like this. And you might think, well, it's an ordinary rock. But if you know what you're talking about, you might notice that there's some glinting going on in there. And that rock contains copper. This is copper ore. It's of value. And when you get a lot of it, it's worth a lot. So, whoever finds these and makes their claim on that land, they would harvest a big harvest. The kingdom of heaven is worth going after. It's worth going after, is what Jesus is trying to tell us using uncomplicated ways. It has great value. And if we want to get this value, this thing that is worth so much, it's possible we have to get rid of something else in order to get the greater treasure. So we may have to get rid of attitudes, we may have to get rid of prejudices, we may even have to get rid of physical items if they hold us back from gaining this kingdom Jesus is talking about. He also uses one other example in our lesson today. He talks about a net catching fish. Now, I know Jesus never had a net like this, but it's what I have, and it's what we're familiar with. So imagine that you dip this net into water and you pull it out, and it's just heaped full of fish. Heaped full. The kingdom of heaven fills us and gives us so much more than we would ever expect to get. This is the kind of thing Jesus is trying to tell us. Jesus uses this vast store of common examples in trying to explain to people the value of the kingdom and how we too can have a very fulfilling relationship with God. And he did this in an uncomplicated way by using ordinary, everyday items. And you might have noticed, maybe, that I at least try to do something similar. I try to take ordinary items that most people are familiar with, and I relate them in some way to how we and God relate to each other. And it doesn't really have to be all that complicated. And this then is a lesson for us when we're reaching out to others and we want to bring out of our memory storeroom our treasures of faith and how great God has been for us. I mean, like my knowledge of a motor, a lot of people, they don't know a lot about what God is like, and they don't try to find it either because they often feel that it's just too complicated for them to figure out. But it's not complicated. Not really. We start by just telling people what God has done for us and how our lives have been affected by our relationship to God. So, keep it simple. Keep it simple. And by doing that, we invite others to take part in the treasure that has been found.